Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Nice to see all of you here. It's been an interesting couple of days, I'm sure, for all of you, as it has been for us as well here. I wouldn't take too much time. We had the opportunity to hear our Honorable Prime Minister talk about his vision on what telecoms can do or is already doing for the people of India and what it's going to do for the world. We had the telecom minister also talk about his vision on where he intends to take the Indian telecom sector forward, and also the role that we all know that telecoms plays in kind of helping to drive digital India vision of the government. I think a lot of talk on 5G and what it can do for driving overall socio-economic growth in the country. I wouldn't spend more time repeating what they've said so eloquently, but rather focus my attention on stalwarts of the industry from India and overseas that will actually tell you where the sector is going. We have people that represent not just themselves as global veterans or Indian veterans of the sector, but also their organizations that do a lot of work in the entire ecosystem as it pertains to the 5G space. And so, without much ado, may I start with some opening comments, Akshay, from yourself. Maybe it will be very useful for us to hear where you see India's digital maturity as it stands today, and what role do you think telecoms can play in kind of taking India telecom forward?
Thanks, Balaji. Is this working? Okay. Balaji, thanks for the question, and good to see the audience here. I would respond to this dividing it into three parts. I think first is that for technology to be useful, what needs to be the facilitating factors? What has happened on the digital front in the last 4-5 years? And what do we expect as likely to happen going forward? So I would first start with that generally many technologies can be useful, but there are two things required for technology to benefit the masses. First is that the timing has to be right. And secondly, there has to be a facilitating ecosystem and other facilitating factors for it to benefit the masses. In an Indian context, I would say that the first Digital India vision was a big facilitating factor which kick-started the activities towards digitalization. In the inaugural address, the Honorable Prime Minister made many comments, and the two that stuck with me were that for technology to really contribute to the progress of the society, the upliftment of the weakest sections of the society is very important. And without that, technology cannot achieve its full objectives. The second important point was that for adoption of technology, literacy is not necessary. And I think this has been proven by the adoption of digital in India very clearly. In addition, the facilitating factors have been the Jan Dhan Yojana, whereby through the mix of opening of bank accounts, Aadhaar, which has become a great authentication mechanism, and the mobility industry and whatever can be done on mobile. And I would say one of the major shifts which has happened is that earlier, few years back when we thought of online, you always thought of computers. Today, anybody talks of online, the immediate thought which comes in your mind is your mobile phone. So I think that is again a major shift, and it has been possible because of all these facilitating factors. The second part is what has happened in the last few years, which has contributed to the society from the digital perspective or the technology perspective. Again, I would say there have been, to my mind, two triggers, one maybe a good one and one not so good. First, we had the demonetization announced in the country, and that fueled the digital payments across the ecosystem of digital payments across the country. I was reading some statistics, and the UPI payments have actually increased 93-fold from financial year 18 to financial year 22. If you look at the total ecosystem of digital payments, in a 4 years' time, this has multiplied 3 times. So really, digital payments first fueled by the demonetization, and then there have been successful initiatives by the government, by the banks in this direction, which has made this possible. Then we were faced with COVID, and unfortunately, that was not something which we would have wanted to make digitalization more mainstream, but that is what has happened. And if we take the example of what COVID has done, while we look at it in bits and pieces, but really speaking, first is that people could work from anywhere. That kept businesses running, which was very, very important. Secondly, education. And if you think of it, if online education or digital classrooms were not possible, people would have probably missed out on one full academic year or maybe more than 1 year of their lives. So that was a major contributor. Thirdly, during the COVID times, we could continue to get supplies through online deliveries, through ordering online. This would not have been possible if the digital means were not available. Fourth, it also enabled services to be continued. Most importantly, if we think of medical or teleconsultation with the doctors, in the COVID time, doctors were also hesitant to meet patients. But if you had COVID symptoms, you could call them, you could digitally have consultation, and you could make it work. And many people who were self-employed, they were running counseling classes, they were running yoga classes, gyms, or whatever. Many of these services continued online. So this was a major factor which, again, contributed to the COVID period being people could kind of navigate through this. The last point I would make is that entertainment also has changed, and the way entertainment is consumed has changed. It would probably have happened otherwise, but again, COVID has accelerated that phenomenon. And we have now shifted to entertainment on demand largely. So this is again a major shift, and I think in the COVID times when people needed to consume more, it was actually a facilitating factor. And if everybody was at home and you had 4 or 5 people who wanted to do different things, that was not possible in the conventional entertainment mechanisms. That was facilitated. So I think all in all, the digital processes or digital adoption has been accelerated. Mobile operators or the mobile industry has played a great role by facilitating everything on mobile. And secondly, I think during the COVID period, it also became important that people were able to continue their services without going out physically, and digital recharges actually picked up during this period. So I would say all in all, this has been a great thing, and as a result of which India has seen quick growth, and India is today the 5th largest economy in the world with a GDP, nominal GDP of about $3.5 trillion. So I would say this is where we are today. Going forward, I would say that there are many things which would probably also happen and continue to happen on the consumer side, which may be gaming, which can happen faster. But healthcare, driverless cars, these things probably will take time to evolve. What I see as happening maybe in a shorter time period is the advent of Industry 4.0, whereby we expect that, and 5G will have a big role to play in that, because 5G brings with its features like low latency or ultra low latency as they call it. Then we have MMTC, which is massive machine type communication. You have the ability to slice networks. And all these features will actually contribute to automating manufacturing in a manner which was not possible otherwise. It is not talking about that you would make a marginal improvement. Probably some things which would be enabled by these technologies and 5G was impossible to do before. So I would expect that in the years to come, let's say in the next 2-3 years, manufacturing and automated manufacturing, including IoT, Internet of Things, and industrial IoT, this would be one of the main drivers of technology being deployed for the betterment, and this would bring a lot of efficiency and productivity improvements. And India, in some ways, has done very well in the services sector. They probably missed out on the bus when China was making rapid progress in manufacturing. And I would hope with government's policies of Atmanirbhar and the promotions being given through PLI, where some sectors, 16 sectors have been identified, and the fact that China is also facing its challenges, I would say that a mix of these geopolitical factors with government incentives and the advent of technology which could make the manufacturing India leapfrog compared to where it is, should do a world of good for the Indian economy and for the consumers in India. So I would pause here, and Balaji, please.
Thank you so much, Akshay, for a very good and wide perspective. Madhusudhan, moving over to you. You've been part of the digital journey yourself for the longest time. Your organization has been kind of, as I see, gearing up for this new revolution. So, some opening comments on you as to where you see India's digital journey taking itself next, and where industry and industry leaders need to focus their attention on what kind of important factors should shape their strategy to cope up with this future growth.
Thanks a lot, Balaji. I think it is segue into what we heard from Akshay. The kind of digital adoption which a country like India has been able to adopt, and uh, and the technology landscape that we have been able to leapfrog into. Broadly, I would like to classify this your question or your comment itself into two or three segments as such. One driven by technology. The technology cannot be seen just as a 5G. Today we are talking about the 5G. It is a fantastic thing which anybody would want to be getting into, and the use cases what expected to be delivered as a part of it. But it's not just the 5G itself. There is a complete ecosystem of the various players within that technology itself. There is a 5G, there is an artificial intelligence, there is a big data, there is a storage, there is a cloud, there is, and hence leading into the kind of IoT use cases what it is coming out. In this, the whole construct of the way the whole service delivery happens. Service delivery, please read this as the way it gets consumed by the end user. It's not just in a technical terms, the way the outcome of these various ecosystem of the technology is getting consumed, one side of it. And hence, as a corollary of that, what is the customer experience? When I say customer experience, the end user experience change what is happening with the complete integrated effect of the technologies. When I say technology again we should read this as starting from a person who is manufacturing a chip, the kind of eSIM or going forward the cloud SIM that gets embedded onto this chip, that gets into the devices which ultimately it gets into any of the machines or any of the consumer equipments what we use for either it could be a retail user or it could be an industrial user. When you put these things, which leads me into the next segue, how does one play in this segment? One needs to decide, as a service provider, I have my strength in what I do. I have spectrum, I have the utility of that spectrum, I have a technology which I will use it. And then I also have an orchestrator which basically talks about various technologies or various, again, when it says that 5G is only the usage capability that's enhancing us. Earlier, even we had 2G, 3G, 5G, 4G, and then now into 5G. When you look at this, it is just that how it gets consumed towards the end user. Just for a track and trace, we may not need 5G. But for a robotics or for an industry or for a major manufacturing setup, probably the conceptualization of utilizing this 5G itself is coming into the fore as such. Somebody asked a question earlier that with the kind of investments what it is expected as a part of 5G itself, are there enough use cases on which this whole capex investment itself could be standing? My answer is double yes. It is more than yes. The reason being, with the technology enablement, what these likes of 5G and the associated ecosystem, what it is supposed to have, I think the use cases are going to be humongous. It could be just a consumer use case or it could be just an industry use case. So next comes into how does, as an organization itself, whether you are a seller or whether you are a buyer, how does it change? When it comes to for a person who is technology, who is trying to put certain ecosystem into the infrastructure of a service provider, the buyer is going to be the strategic person. The buyer is going to be the person who is leading the business. It is no more just a technology conversation. It is no more just some IT infrastructure. No disrespect to anybody who were doing it earlier. It is just that all of these are becoming a part of the business strategy or a boardroom conversation than just being some technology being there and then how it is getting delivered to the consumer. So this is the second part of it. Finally, if I have to come in, how does this whole various ecosystems which are there, it is for us. The government has been fantastic in terms of making available spectrum. And then, of course, the whole spectrum itself getting evolved, who uses, who is the consumer, who is the owner, and then how it is being used up. Of course, the whole evolution is happening. But having done that, who will play what? A cloud player will have his mode of playing. A technology supplier will have his contribution. A service provider has got his contribution. A system integrator has got his contribution. It is very, very critical for each one of us to identify and be complementary in the whole ecosystem of various players who are there, and then driving this whole digital growth. It cannot happen in a siloed or a one individual's approach itself. It needs to be a much, much more holistic ecosystem. That's where I would leave my thoughts.
Thank you so much. I think you talked about many, many facets. The complementarity of various players in the whole ecosystem is a great thought to leave with, which then leads me on to maybe Salil. Again, some opening comments from you. As a tech player, what do you see? You've got about 30 years plus of global experience as well. So seeing from far what's happening here and the other trends that you see. And leaving from there on to the question that I thought would be, or the aspect which will be useful from Madhu's comment on collaboration. So where do you think you see collaboration taking us forward in terms of, transforming the entire digital technology ecosystem in India?
Okay, thanks, Balaji. Good morning, everyone. So let me give you my some sort of thoughts about what we see from the outside as to what's happening in India. This is my first visit to IMC, and I had to say that the energy level here is just phenomenal. I mean, we attend the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, but we don't see the level of energy and enthusiasm and exuberance that we see in this place here. Now, I would say that from our perspective, we've seen the transition of India into the digital universe about 5-6 years ago. So that started, with 4G deployment. 4G deployment went from in 2016, it was only about 9% adoption in India to now about 68% adoption. And that's a phenomenal growth, about 15x growth in data consumption. Today we see that Indians consume about 15 exabytes of data every month. And I don't know even how many zeros that is, right? But from our perspective as a silicon vendor, we were part of Xilinx, now acquired by AMD. We are very proud and honored to be part of the deployment on 4G for all those years. So we are in almost all the radios that you see here in India, and we are extremely proud of the fact that we could be part of that revolution. Now, and we learned a lot through that, through those last 5-6 years, and we can now apply that to accelerating our 5G deployment. So with AMD also acquiring Xilinx, now we do end-to-end deployment. We are in the radios, we are in the compute units, the distributed units, we are in the core networks, we are in the data centers doing acceleration of applications. So we feel pretty good now about 5G deployment. And we feel pretty good that the adoption of 5G is going to be phenomenal in India. I mean, it's going to be faster than anything we've seen in the world. And in India, we feel that people are more willing to adopt newer technology at a much faster rate. So that's sort of our perspective. In terms of, I would say, collaboration, there are many areas we can collaborate here between operators, OEMs, silicon vendors, solution vendors. We see ourselves mostly as a platform. We don't produce the solutions. We produce the software programmable hardware platform and the CPUs for the innovators in India and the developers in India to produce the solution and add value on top of our platform. So we give you the platform, but the innovation has to come from India. So that's one part of the collaboration we see we can do here. And we see that there are about 200 startups here, a large ecosystem of developers. it feels pretty good that we can collaborate in India with a significant number of ecosystem players, including, I would say, with Mavenir, who's sitting right next to me here. Now, the other part about where we could collaborate is in Open RAN. Open RAN has been around, it's been talked about for some time. The place where it would get adopted would be in India. And if it's not successful in India, I don't think it'll be successful anywhere else in the world. And I bet my money on making it successful in India with a whole host of startups and ecosystem players that are sitting here trying to make that successful for India. The third area in terms of collaboration would be, as we see India moving from being a consumer of 5G technology to being a producer of 5G technology. It feels like the aspirational goal for India is to produce this 5G technology and export it outside to the rest of the world. If you want to do that, you need to be able to pull in more talent into the industry. We in AMD have about 6,000, 7,000 engineers here, but we feel like we need a lot more talent into the telecom industry here, and we need to make sure that we create an environment where more and more engineers enter this industry. And I would say the last but not the least is collaboration with academia. We have a strong collaboration with a whole bunch of universities here. Specifically, I would point out IIT Madras as being one of the pioneers here. We have all of the test beds in India, all the 5G test beds in India are through collaboration between AMD and academia here. And we need to do a lot more in that space. And that will give us a lot more talent, that will feed the industry, that will feed innovation, and we can definitely achieve the aspirational goal of being not just a consumer of this technology, but actually a producer of this technology.
Thank you so much, Salil. I think wonderful 4 or 5 areas that you identified for collaboration. Going beyond the industry to academia was a very interesting point, and we'll dwell upon that a little bit later. Maybe moving on to you, Narendra, and you represent Rakuten, pioneer in so many ways in the 5G area. You've done on technology, on use cases, many, many things. So anything that you'd like to first share from the global perspective, and then more specifically to the Indian context, and if you could elaborate, how organizations like yours with your global experience can help to actually leverage the power of 5G and help India accelerate, towards its digital goals.
Thank you, Balaji, and good morning, everyone. Great to be here. I like the term ecosystem that Madhusudhan used, actually. And I think there are 4 pillars in the ecosystem, right? One is the government, second one is the operators, and then the technology companies which power these operators, and then the people themselves. And I feel that the tech companies are way ahead of the operators in the 5G technology. Now, we have been talking about 5G in India for quite some time, and it's amazing to see that it has been launched. But if you see around the globe, 5G has been there for quite some time, right? And all these around the globe 5G launches that has happened in the past couple of years, they have been powered by the technology that is being built in India. So I feel that it is time for us to basically power our own operators, and our own operators actually use Indian tech companies to basically launch these 5G services as soon as possible. It will probably take some time, but I think the government has been playing a very key and pivotal role in basically supporting all these initiatives. For example, even conducting this IMC and supporting such events, as well as freeing up the resources and cooperating with everything, right? It's happening really, really, really well, and I think this ecosystem is in the right spot right now. The fact that Prime Minister Modi ji was here, actually launching the 5G services, shows the support the government has, and also all the tech companies participating, right? We are in a very, very good spot where all of us have the same vision, and we're working together. Having said that, I represent both an operator perspective as well as technology perspective, because as many of you know, Rakuten Mobile was launched at record speed, 18 months. Within 18 months they launched. which just shows that, if there is a vision and if the operators really want to take risk, they can launch things very, very fast because there is technology to support it. And at the same time, the Rakuten Symphony as a technology partner for Rakuten Mobile has everything. We were talking about Open RAN, and I know Mavenir is also, is pioneering in that one. So Open RAN, edge technology, or automation, all of these things are being built in India. So I think India is not just going to be, as you said, not just going to be a consumer, but it's going to be a producer of 5G technology. So I'm looking forward to all the great things that's going to happen in India.
Thank you so much, Narendra. I think I see that as the common theme. Start from Akshaya, you talking about the PLI and the geopolitical things, and Madhu, you saying something on the same, and the opportunities for collaboration. We come to you, Puneet. I think your organization has been kind of in the forefront when it comes to the Open RAN thing. So your perspectives, some opening comments on where you see this technology itself go, how it can truly help in terms of operators that would be looking at deployment of 5G services in the coming quarters and years. And so if you can share your perspectives on that, it will be very useful.
Thank you. I think I agree with all the previous speakers. Really covered a lot of ground and leaves me very little new stuff. But let me start with, I think, what Akshaya said when you asked about the maturity of digital first kind of initiative in India. Where are we on that? I think it was quite intriguing when you think about that in Indian context, where most of this digital first vision or the journey is being really fulfilled by the mobile sector, right? The way you're consuming, I think, mentioned entertainment, payments, banking, all of that is happening on mobile phones first before it's happening on computers. So it really becomes a question of what the maturity of the telco, of the cellular service provider segment. And that's where I think, when you start to think about that, really, in my mind at least, maturity of that really depends on really three pillars, devices, apps, applications that run on the top, and infrastructure and connectivity. I think apps and ecosystem, Salil mentioned how many startups are and how vibrant that ecosystem is there. I think that's second to none compared to anywhere else in the world. Same thing on the devices. I think there's a lot of innovation happening, not just on the devices, but also in a kind of innovation that helps meet the cost requirements that this economy needs. So that innovation that, those devices get built, get designed here and go outside of India as well. I think where I'll spend a lot of time is the connectivity and the infrastructure segment. And that's where I think India now is launching 5G. So it has the opportunity to kind of look what has happened in other parts of the world, take those lessons. And also, I think one of the things that really was intriguing and I found it really fascinating was what happened during the inauguration. We actually get to see the use cases. How is it going to be delivered to the common man, and then work backwards from the use cases and figure out, okay, what kind of network is going to deliver that kind of experience, whether it is how it's going to help the laborers in their tunnel, how it's going to help the education sector. So you kind of work backwards. That hasn't happened anywhere else in the world. I think that's a great way to kind of start this event and also start the journey towards 5G. And I think that would be key, together with what's happening also on the regulatory space, the focus here in this space and what Madhusudhan mentioned, where all the ecosystem players have to come together. And if they can take lessons from use cases and work backwards from there, I think that would be a tremendous thing. And that's where I think, even though you may be a little bit, starting a little bit late on the 5G deployment, but you have the opportunity, if you set yourself correctly, that you can accelerate at a much faster pace. So you want to set yourself up so that, there'll be a lot of innovation that will get you much further ahead than anywhere else. And that's where you want to design the ecosystem around open and collaborative interfaces and partnerships. And that was the question that Balaji asked me. And I think Mavenir as a company, we believe in open interfaces. The whole philosophy is, we have a ton of products, the whole end-to-end portfolio from IMS to packet core to RAN, which is my responsibility, and radios. All the products talk to each other, based on open interfaces. We work with more partners than any of the other infra OEMs out there. So we really believe, of course, and there's a panel yesterday that I was on, one of the things that people keep talking about, how open ecosystem is going to drive more vendor diversity, more better pricing for the cellular service providers. But the thing that does not get as much attention is it accelerates innovation. Any other industry in the world, open interfaces, what they have done to that industry is put them on a rocket speed, and that's what it could do to the 5G rollout here as well. If you set yourself up where you have people who can come in with point solutions, best-in-class radio units, best-in-class CUDU, or best-in-class applications that improve radio performance or over-the-top experience, and they're able to offer that to the consumers without being blocked by proprietary vertically integrated solutions, that will put really the acceleration that I referred to earlier. So that's kind of.
No, wonderful, Puneet. I think very, very good points that you made there. Just moving around the team once more before we come to a couple of other dimensions that I want to explore. Akshay, in your view, operators such as yours, what kind of a role do you think they can play in leveraging the power of 5G to help India meet its digital goals?
Okay, so I think if we talk about 5G and technology, and let me just first continue with what I talked about earlier, which is the automated manufacturing. And I'll repeat the point that 5G technology particularly, and I mean one of the features is massive machine type communications, which means one of the applications is that you could put so many sensors in a small area whereby a lot of data could be collated, which could then facilitate the real high-end use of artificial intelligence, because as we all know, AI evolves as you can get more data, and which can then enable it to predict the responses going forward. This can get facilitated if you collect more and more data, and this is just an example. But then you have ultra-low latency, whereby if something where the response is delayed and the action is not taken at time, it could lead to some kind of an accident on a factory shop floor. But with the ultra-low latency coming in, I think those pitfalls could be avoided, and what used to be conceptual earlier could actually become a reality. So I would say automated manufacturing would be one of the largest applications. But if we go beyond, and I think when I talk about manufacturing, I would say agriculture is also an industry which is somewhat different from manufacturing, but in some ways the applications could be similar. So, I mean, we have been demonstrating some of the agri applications whereby you could get weather-related information, you could get soil-related information, you could get what is happening at a particular location, and all that information can be fed back to the cloud at a central location, whereby then it can be used to provide feedback to the farmer as to what is the right time to sow, what is the quantum of seeds that you should put in, what is the quantum of fertilizer you should put in. So getting it right, both in terms of quantity and the timing of doing it. And I've been told that some of the initial trials have resulted in double the productivity and half the cost. And half the cost because you are not just applying things generically, but you are being very specific into what needs to be done. So manufacturing and agriculture both are great applications where automation can be applied, or data collection and using that data to provide decisions could be done. If we just move beyond that, and I'll just cover two more areas quickly. One is what we demonstrated in terms of in the inaugural session on the workers' safety. The basic concept there is that while that was demonstrated in an underground tunnel, and it could also happen in mining areas where safety is a big concern, and to be able to remotely supervise and control a location to see what is happening in that area, to make sure that the workers' safety is not compromised is a big step forward. And this would get facilitated because 5G technology brings you the bandwidth, the speeds, the latency, which can make it possible. The other major area could be healthcare, which is being talked about a lot. Healthcare 5G can make remote diagnostics possible, whereby the doctor could be at one location, the instruments which are doing the diagnostics could be at other location. The data can be transmitted. They can see it both visually and the data which is coming in, and which could be a great application. There's also a demonstration of an ambulance, which we have on our booth, whereby, and I believe some of the most critical time for a patient where there's been an accident or an emergency is what happens in the first 30 minutes to 1 hour when the person is being moved from the site of the accident or his home to the hospital. And a remote diagnostic or a video access or whatever information is there from the ambulance to the emergency section of the hospital actually enables them to get data to be better prepared to receive the patient. And if anything needs to be done, and provide advice to the paramedics or the whoever is there in the ambulance to take care of the patient in the best possible manner. So I guess automated manufacturing, agriculture, worker safety, healthcare, these are some of the examples. And I get there's a lot of scope for the organizations to be able to leverage.
Thank you, Akshay. Good use cases and some thought, food for thought for everyone. Salil, you talked about collaboration specifically with academia. You talked about talent. Do you see that developing well? Do you see talent crunch already, given these are new areas, or you think from the way you're seeing it from outside as well as your operations in India that that's not much of a challenge, but it's kind of being dealt with maturely?
I think I would say that we are looking actually to India for the talent here, right? I mean, in fact, if there's there's one issue in the states and other places, basically there is a big talent crunch there. Specifically engineers moving into electrical engineering and trying to be in this very hardware-centric world. But in India, that's not the case, right? We see plenty of talent, and we are doubling down on India, and we are going to hire a lot more people here than anywhere else in the world. And we are bringing in more and more people into this environment. Now, the fact that the government here is so bullish about telecom and has policies that are encouraging telecom industry also helps build up that talent pool here. So we feel pretty good about the talent here, and this is where we want to come to build up that portfolio of products. Yeah.
Thank you. Narendra, just moving on to you to build on the same thing. You spoke about the four pillars. You said government, the operators, the technology, and the people. Right? You kind of focus on those things. Again, in your view, you think that partnership would work in a mature way to accelerate things from the place that you stand and the work that you do with all these other players in the ecosystem?
Okay, absolutely. With the four pillars that I was talking about, right? I always feel that the people are way ahead of us. We actually underestimate people. Like Modi ji was saying, right? You just give them something, they'll take it ahead, right? And then, we have right behind them is the technology companies, and then right behind them is operators and the government. So I think 5G for me is the step 2 for India in democratizing the connectivity for everyone, not just in India, but for the entire world, actually. That's like the, technology, highway for people to basically, achieve what they want to achieve. And I always feel that, there are 3 areas that we can focus on with the 5G revolution that's happening. I think the operators as well as the businesses must invest in the latest technologies. I mean, Open RAN is something that is, going to change the world, going to change the way telcos are going to operate. And I know there are, some reservations about the Open RAN technology, but I think that's the way forward. Automation, edge cloud, and also manufacturing of the hardware is extremely important. So the investment in these technologies, Open RAN, automation, manufacturing, as well as the edge cloud is extremely important. And then the second thing is, the democratization of the innovation, right? Most of the innovation that we see right now is coming from big cities like Bangalore, Delhi, Hyderabad. With 5G, I feel that, the innovation will go into all the other smaller towns and villages. Now, imagine the number of people who live there. I mean, for India, villages and small towns are the core. That's the heart. So if the innovation can start happening from there, there is no limit. I think the digital billion vision that the government has here, we could connect billion people. And if we could connect billion people, we could collect 3 other billion people who don't have connectivity in the world, right? So we could be the country who actually provides connectivity to everybody. Last but not the least, I feel that, overall, I think, like I said, we are in a very good spot. We should be able to achieve what we are supposed to do. And like I said, innovation is the key, and India is in the right front.
Thank you so much, Narendra. Madhu, moving on to you. You spoke about people picking up the sweet spot that they should pick for playing their role in achieving the dream. You see that maturity in the industry, or is it still very fiercely competitive? Or do you think eventually we'll find our space where each one focuses on what they need to do to make the vision come true? Because it is still the opportunity of a 1 trillion digital economy in India, right? So there's a lot of space, but do you think we'll get there sooner, or it'll be a little bit of a painful journey?
Absolutely. In fact, I expected this comment or question before even I said what I said. But actually, if you look at it, just to give you a little bit of data point to this, from a 5G user's perspective, just see this in the context of both consumer as well as industrial usage. One of the analyst reports says that it's about 100 million plus users are there in just in last 2 years since 5G was made available for usage, for a consumption. Vis-a-vis, if I just compare this 2 years is, you can read it as 5 to 6 years in reference to that earlier technologies of 4G or prior to that as such. The reason why I thought it would be a good number to understand is that in this, there is a complete ecosystem that is operating here. Apart from what I said, starting from a chip manufacturer, going up to the service provider and finally to that end consumer through an industry or through an enterprise, through an industry or through a direct to the retail. Apart from that, there is one big thing called the security of each one of these. How is it secured? Because Open RAN, we spoke about in this context as well, which basically means that you are opening out and then at the same time, you are making it more and more cloudified at every stages of this technology. At the same time, at the every stages of that, before it reaches to the consumption. I do see this as a big, I think, a requirement or a need of an hour for every one of them to be contributing in that ecosystem. Otherwise, as you rightly said, I don't know whether it is 1 trillion or it is much more than that. It is such a huge industry. In fact, Akshay spoke about some of the key use cases now. If we just go back 2 days back, our Prime Minister mentioned about MSME. He just picked on that particular this one. In fact, one of the use cases, what we are also demonstrating in Tata Communication is that I call this as one of the industry which I pick up apart from what you mentioned, Akshay, is a automobile segment, just as an example. And this, I use this use case for a research to road as a construct. The moment I say research to road, the moment whoever evangelist or an architect or a person who is having his complete design in his mind of an automobile, from there to the journey of how it comes into the production. It has got tons of navigation, it happens in the factory. During the design, there is a data back and forth happening. During the quality check, there are data design happening. During the production, there is a quality design happening, or the production enhancement, how it is happening. Then into the market, then into the dealer, then into that consumer. If you look at that, one of the specific use case what we took was, how do you classify or qualify a spare part that's being manufactured in an automobile segment? This is again a very specific segment. We can generalize it to every one of that industries where it is actually. In this particular, the use case, what we are showing is the quality of a paint. It may look very simple because if you see that when certain thing is getting manufactured, the quality of the paint becomes very, very critical for it to be running into production or getting disqualified from a production. This is exactly the use case. Basically, it has got, you mentioned about, Akshaya, you mentioned about multiple cameras, your ultra latency, and then the bandwidth, what we are putting in. Every one of them works here. There are about 8 cameras which are focusing on it. There is a robo which has been working on it. There are few sensors which are there in this. There is a backhaul of 5G. And again, why 5G, people may ask. In this case, it is 5G. In a safety or worker safety requirement, probably we don't need a 5G. But when you look at the holistic technological advancement, starting from a simple, we'll go from a LoRaWAN, 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G, and then in fact, going forward, 6G also, the use cases are going to be humongous, and our need for working in the integrated system will become a compelling factor than whether we want to do it or not as such.
Thank you, Madhu. Well articulated. As we come towards the end of this rather interesting panel discussion, I might just go around the panelists for short comments. The minister talked about reforms 2.0 coming apart from the telecom bill itself. Anything that comes to you that you'd want to recommend them to focus on? Maybe I'll start with you, Akshay, and then move on.
So I think firstly, we should compliment the government. The pace of change and the pace of improvements has been really phenomenal. And many significant changes have been made over the last few years. The reforms package was there. There's a new telecom law being proposed now. There's an ease of doing business. And the best example was that, as the minister himself mentioned on the inaugural day, was that the spectrum payment was made, I think, somewhere on 16th or 17th August. And the spectrum allocation almost happened simultaneously. So this is a big step forward from the earlier times when it used to take 2 to 3 months. Having said that, I would make 2 points. I think one of the things is that India, the Indian telecom industry today has one of the highest levies across anywhere in the world. We have got 18% GST. There is about 12% of license fee and spectrum usage charges. This adds to 30%, and this is very, very visible to everyone. I think what is not very visible is that the price of spectrum, if you convert it to an annuity value and you calculate that as a percentage of revenue, that is another 28% of the industry revenue. So if you take an industry revenue of 231 crores and you calculate what is the total value of the spectrum, which is close to about 6 lakh crores today, or whatever spectrum has been given out by the government, you convert what is the annuity value of that payment, that comes to 28% of revenue. So on top of the 30%, which is GST plus license fee, there is another 28% in the form of cost of spectrum. That makes it 58% of revenue is actually reflected as government levies in a country where the tariffs are the lowest. So really, if there is a requirement that investment should be made, and all these are capital-intensive industry, for any migration of technology, a lot of investment is required. It is important that government reduces the burden on the industry so that operational cash generation can actually be released for investments. That is the first thing. Secondly, if we see in the context of 5G, 5G is the wireless part of the technology. But with each upgradation of technology, particularly 3G to 4G and now 4G to 5G, the data which is being carried by the networks is humongous. This data cannot be carried wirelessly. You need fiber to carry this data. Unfortunately, the right-of-way regulations in the country have been very, very difficult. There are multiple municipalities with all their regulations, requirements, bureaucracy, red tape. Government has taken some steps towards that. But if 5G were to be successful in the country, it is very important that this right-of-way mess which exists today is sorted out. So I would say these two are the biggest changes.
Thank you, Akshay. Narendra, just the same question to you, then I'll come to Puneet in a bit. I just want to.
I think it's funny that you are talking about government takes away almost 50% of whatever you make. I was talking to one of my friends the other day, even personal income taxes, right? We end up paying 58% to the government in the form of taxes and then all this additional stuff that we pay. But I think it's very, very important that the government actually supports in those areas. One other thing I really think that very important is with all the use cases that we are talking about, 90% of the 5G use cases becomes like watching videos, making calls and stuff like that. In order for us to make use of it in a proper way, I think our education system needs to be up-leveled a lot. I think, like I said, the democratization of the innovation should go to small towns and villages. We need to educate people how this 5G impacts them. And one more thing is, I think we should start thinking about the private 5G, which is extremely important, I believe, especially in the areas of education and healthcare, because those are the things that can bring quick impact to all these businesses and show the real value of 5G.
Thank you. Puneet, there was a lot of talk on Open RAN, so you must feel the pressure already of the opportunities more than everything else. So maybe, a couple of closing comments from you on the Open RAN opportunity and the collaboration. Is it truly open? Will it get there fast enough for India to, explode in its 5G network deployment? One question on that part, and then leading on to what role government can play from a policy point of view to accelerate that whole thing.
So I think there's a question on the speed, can Open RAN get there? And also, I think I want to start with sort of the need, right? So, and with respect to speed, I think Narendra made a comment earlier, they launched a network in 18 months. And that's kind of the time what people have committed, right, on the stage on inauguration. That's about 15 to 18 months, what the service provider mentioned. So I think it is definitely there. The speed is there. But let me first kind of start with some of the comments that made earlier. And one of the panels I was on yesterday, one of the panelists was a service provider, and he mentioned a comment that kind of stuck with me is that 5G represents a big investment. But what's happening is that ARPUs are southbound, and CapEx and OpEx needed is northbound. So you gotta get these curves completely going in opposite directions. So how do you drive sustainable change in that environment that will sort of accelerate 5G and the innovation in this space? And that's where I think what Madhu mentioned earlier, Akshaya mentioned about the different use cases, that represent in my mind the new opportunities that will help monetize 5G, private 5G. And when people were going through these use cases, right, you mentioning about medical sector and education, worker safety, I was going through my mind, this is going to require lower latency. This, medical sector, this is going to require higher uplink speed. This is going to require more downlink. So all of this is going to require a different set of network slices. So what you really need is a network that is built, and that was also my earlier comment, work backwards from the use cases. You're going to need a network that is so programmable, so automatable, that you can serve these hundreds of private network customers. Each of them is not so big and geographically different location, but their needs are going to be different. You should be able to configure slices or on-prem solutions to be able to deliver to them what they need and monetize your 5G investment. So that's that capability to automate and innovate comes with this whole framework of open virtualized RAN. So that's the need, right? We have to think about a way to do this. Otherwise, we have to accelerate faster than where the rest of the world is on 5G. So that's kind of on the need aspect. On the speed, I think velocity is there. I think the solutions, one of the reasons velocity is there is that, Open vRAN doesn't reinvent the wheel. I mean, we do much less than what any other incumbent proprietary RAN provider does. They do all the way from soup to nuts, silicon to boxes, software, everything. We leverage off, right? These guys are building silicon. They're moving process node every generation. We just get the power consumption savings that they're going to give. We just put it in the DU and bam, we have it. Same thing on the platform side. Whatever is happening on the IT space, whatever automation is happening on public cloud, private cloud, we can leverage that because it's cloud native application that we're building. So that's how you get innovation. You focus on what real your value is, and you do that faster, and you leverage from rest of the elements. So that's where I think the speed comes. Last point on your policy. I think already talked about taxes, and that's all. I'll leave that subject aside. But I think the policy has to encourage this kind of behavior in the industry, in the ecosystem. That government kind of incentivizes these open solutions, made in India solutions where different players, different startups from India can come in and contribute to the telco sector and the equipment there. So I think that's kind of, I'm going to leave that a little bit directional.
Thank you so much. I think the organizers want us to leave pretty quickly. So last question to each of you to put you on the spot, but short answers. Many application talked about if you were to put your, your visionary glasses and say 2 years from now, one application that you believe is going to be mainstream or more popular in 5G.
Sorry. If I have to pick one thing, it's going to be a video across surveillance in Industry 4.0. There are lots of things, but this one I would definitely pick that it would be the one.
Thank you. Akshay, to you.
I think from a utility perspective, there could be many other things, but my view is that the thing which will catch on the fastest is cloud gaming, because there's a huge population, young population there, which is looking for this. And I read somewhere that the total gaming industry globally is some 92 billion US dollars, out of which 50% is already online gaming. So really speaking, this is growing at a very rapid pace, and this is becoming more than the physical sports industry. And so online gaming, my bet is on that, that will pick up fast.
Thank you. Puneet, to you.
I think it's 5G is going to, in 2-3 years, going to help us get deeper into other industries, right? What we talk about private 5G networks going into industrial, medical, education, worker safety. I think that the collection of all those use cases is
Private network is what you're saying. Okay, great. Yourself, Salil.
So Balaji, I'm going to weasel out of this question by saying that it's been deployed in the US and other places for a long time, and we are still looking for the killer app that can be monetized really well, right? It's one thing to have apps, but to be monetized is very hard, right? So it remains to be seen. All of these applications that I hear are good, right? But it's a challenge to the industry to find the right one.
I love that contrarian view, Salil. Over to you, Narendra, for the last word.
No, I think for me, I would bet on the education system. I think that's where it's going to help us a lot.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I think this has been a fantastic panel. Some fabulous points that they've raised out here, and I'm sure it's given a lot of food for thought for all of us. And with that, may I hand this back to the organizers with a huge round of applause to our panelists here, please.